Hello everyone, welcome back to TrekChat. Quite a bit to talk about in this video, a lot of Stranger Worlds related stuff. But first off, if you missed it, I did a book recommendation video for the newest TOS novel that just came out. That's really good. There's a new Deep Space Nine book up for pre-order coming tentatively next summer called The Peacemakers by Una McCormick. No finalized cover for that yet. And the Season 3 Blu-ray and 4K, as well as a Steelbook Collector's Edition of Stranger Worlds Season 3 is up for pre-order. It actually looks like a really beautiful Steelbook. It's just really sad that the season itself ended up being such a disappointment that I won't be adding it to the collection. Always disappointing when there's a piece of Star Trek that I just have no interest in revisiting or owning. And also related to Strange New Worlds, they are wrapping up, finally filming Season 5, Season 4 and 5. They're getting through those to the point where a lot of the actors are kind of posting their goodbyes, their last days where they're going to be using their trailers, or last day shooting. So that's kind of coming to an end. And the same thing with the Starfleet Academy. A lot of the sets are being slated for storage, and whether that means it's just temporary and the Academy will continue on into the new era of Star Trek that's quickly approaching, I very much doubt that's the case. I feel like it's more just that they spent an insane amount of money that they're going to be reusing, redressing a lot of these set pieces. You might see a lot of them reused in whatever upcoming Star Trek projects are out there. And the last thing in relation to Strange New Worlds, I posted a while ago on the community page, seeing if anyone could figure out the one real negative with Stranger Worlds that's been irking me that I haven't really talked about a whole lot. And Stranger Worlds has been kind of this mixed bag where some of it I really, really love. I thought there was a lot of promise in it. There's also been a lot of big disappointments. It's been very hit or miss. I'm really not super strongly in the camp of, oh my gosh, I love it, it's one of my favorite shows, nor am I in the camp of it's terrible, it's a disaster, because sometimes it's both. I mean, it's really been weirdly back and forth, and first kind of exciting with the potential of it and then disappointing. But one element that is in the negative, that even in the episodes I really enjoy, the one thing that holds it back is something I don't think I've really mentioned, and it only kind of came to mind in watching one of the episodes of the Decon Chamber podcast where Rick Berman and Brandon Braga were on, and they had mentioned a lot of the use of contemporary language and just the way the dialogue is portrayed in Strange New Worlds. And in listening to them, I was like, wow, you know what, that really, they were able to articulate something that had been bugging me, and I realized that I hadn't touched upon it, at least I don't think I have, in any of my episode discussions where I just kind of watch an episode and immediately talk about my immediate reaction. It's just one of those things that's so ubiquitous with every episode throughout the entire thing that it just doesn't really even stand out anymore. It's just kind of how it is, where there is this usage of language that lacks sophistication. Star Trek used to promote this educated, articulate society very carefully, like without coming across as needlessly grandiloquent or intentionally convoluted, to indicate any kind of false sense of intelligence. It really wasn't the just kind of throw the thesaurus out there. It was just intelligent writing. It reminded me, growing up watching TNG and Deep Space Nine and even like Voyager, like there was a sense of the language, while even though the plot lines were frequently a commentary on the times that they were being written in, the actual usage of language was not as entrenched within the time place it was taking place in, and the sounded, again, not needlessly eloquent, but more just educated and sophisticated in a society where that type of thought process and that way of speaking was commonplace. It was everyone, and it reminded me more of certain circles of adults that I would be around with, growing up with teachers and professors as parents, and some of their friends being in those circles, and certain groups of people where it's just like, all right, this is just how intelligent adults just speak in a casual, general manner. And that's kind of where Star Trek was. It wasn't trying and attempting to have this overly difficult or pretentious thing. You had enough of the quote-unquote technobabble to kind of piece together with complexity within the dialogue, to where it was just how educated people spoke. They were just casually sitting around, drinking a beer. That's what I grew up hearing in certain circles, and that's just how I viewed Star Trek. And now we get into these shows, and even Stranger Worlds, even when you have a really good episode that might have some interesting sophistication in the storyline, the way everyone comports themselves and speaks, it sounds more like a random conversation at a mall. It seems as if the perspective of a lot of the modern Trek writers is that intelligence and pomposity are inseparable, and that's a ridiculous notion. I think you can just kind of feel that within some of the writing, and I feel like that's a very disturbing perspective through which lens to look through which you're writing dialogue for Star Trek, is that somehow sounding intelligent when you are people who are working on one of the most important ships in this massive federation, some of the years and years of training and education, for them to not sound like your average Joe is somehow displaying a sense of arrogance. And I think that's silly. That's not the way. It doesn't seem natural. Again, the way they speak, sounding like going to work and hearing the conversations of teenagers in 2025 reminds me of the language of these highly intelligent, educated adults that are supposedly the best of the best and have gone through the academy, and it doesn't ring true. It seems bizarre, and I think in the long run, it's also going to really hold the show back, because it's going to feel much more dated by its language. And part of it also comes from, again, how I just talked about the way people interact on that show in a manner which frequently lacks a sense of class. It feels more like a group of buddies. It feels more casual than it should, particularly in very serious circumstances. If you watch older Star Trek, there's a big difference in the way people interact, even people that are very close, best friends in life, when they're on the job, when they're in a serious situation, when they're in anything where they are to comport themselves with a sense of professionalism. You see that, and you see how different that is to then when they're hanging out in someone's quarters or 10 forward, and you experience that in real life too. I've been in a situation where I've been the boss of people that are close friends of mine, and when you're out and about outside of work, you speak differently, you interact differently, you are an equal. But when we were working, it was more of a yes sir kind of thing, because that's just how things function. And we're talking about a vessel where people have gone through, Starfleet, even though first and foremost is about exploration and science and diplomacy, there is that sort of rigid military-esque structure to the way everything is run. And on Strange New Worlds, most of the time, there's very little difference between the way people speak to each other on the bridge versus in Pike's grandiose suite. To where many cases, even if I was enjoying the story being told, one thing I was holding it back, along with the usage of language, was how I just wasn't buying these people being in this professional setting, because they weren't acting that way. And I feel like it's all coming from a place of trying to have a very casual audience be able to relate and be buddy kind of feeling with these characters, but it's had the exact opposite effect on me, where I was relating more to, and the ways that they would carry themselves in something like TNG. To me, that felt more natural, more how you should act in that sort of setting, and really just that's how I've grown up emulating that and seeing how it's that's how you present yourself, is with an aura of dignity and intelligence. And I just feel that that's missing in a lot of Stranger Worlds, even some of the better episodes. It even hurts some of the genuinely fantastic episodes, to where it also ties into what's going on with these low episode numbers and huge gaps between seasons. A big problem with TV in general, not just Star Trek, but even a good courtroom episode like Ad Astra per Aspera. It's something that was well done, but the fact that it was so lauded kind of confused me at the time, even though it just felt like in a type of episode that Star Trek generally does well. And while it turned out to be a good episode, it was something that if it had aired in the middle of a season during like 90s Trek, it would have been just a decent episode of the week. It didn't quite live up to something like Measure of a Man or The Drumhead. So many examples of that type of setting within Star Trek to where when it's measured up against any of those, it's a good episode but falls short of what they accomplished. And it just shows the dip in quality where something that would have been just, hey, that was a pretty good episode, can't wait till next week, turns into this instant classic in comparison to what else is coming out there at the time. So that's really the real frustration, is that I just feel like a lot of the writing, even when the bulk of the story is done well, the dialogue and the way the characters are presented really lacks the ability to create something which is both sophisticated and clear, concise, and coherent. I feel like Star Trek used to do a really good job with that, of adding some intelligence without being obtuse and inaccessible. And I feel like this has kind of lost that, where the feeling is that to be accessible, you need to be more obvious, more dumbed down, and much more integrated into the language of the moment for an audience to be able to relate to what is going on. And I feel that's really the wrong way to go, and hope that changes, and the overall quality of the dialogue and just the style, not just quality, but the style changes when we get into this new era to something that is more reminiscent of Star Trek of the past. And continuing just a few episodes in our TNG rewatch, we have Coming of Age. And this one I always found the Wesley story to be the far more interesting element, which is usually not always the case. But the B story of Picard being under investigation towards his competency for command is interesting in how it ties in to later episodes, and sort of one of the things I like in season 1 that you don't see a lot of in TNG in general outside of like a two-parter is the continuing threads of the mystery of this threat from within the Federation that's going on. And it is an interesting way of course, early on as well, seeing the crew's loyalty towards Picard and getting a look into that. But I actually really like Wesley taking his entrance exam to try and get into Starfleet Academy and getting to meet the other prospective cadets and seeing what those entrance exams were like. I found that to be very fascinating, and I feel like that's one way in which a lot of the Starfleet Academy type stuff works, is not necessarily a whole show focused on the idea, but getting the little glimpses here and there, watching that first season, really getting an idea of what it takes to even get into the Academy in the first place. And that ties in again to that issue with Strange New Worlds, and that this is such a rigorous environment, and you go to the Academy, it's not like what I hope we're not going to see, but looks like we're going to see in the new Starfleet Academy series, like a community college type environment, and the sense of fun, like there's no going to be Thirsty Thursday on the quad. In Starfleet Academy, it's much more rigid. There still are chances for people to pull pranks and things and be of that age demographic, but there is a sense of seriousness and a requirement for a sense of decorum that I feel is shown throughout Star Trek to a certain point, and how it is very rigid, and it really have to be not just driven and intellectually gifted. You have to strive to go above and beyond your limits and really want to be in Starfleet to even make it through. And I like seeing a little bit of that here in Coming of Age. And last one we'll do today, because I know this is a longer one, talking about Strange New Worlds so much, is Heart of Glory. And this one has always stuck out in my mind from when I first saw it as a kid. I always loved Klingon-focused stuff, and this was a great episode to introduce a lot of Worf's character and his connection to Klingons as the Enterprise rescues some fugitive Klingons, and Worf's desire and tie to his people is fleshed out through his interactions with these Klingons, and it actually has some real good, exciting, tense moments. We get pieces of what have become over time definitive aspects of Klingon culture first introduced here in Heart of Glory. So overall, I think this is a fun episode, a good episode, an episode again with a great sense of tension at some points. But if you are in particular a Klingon fan or a Worf fan, I think it's a great Season 1 episode. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there for today, and I'll see you around in the next video.